Hello and welcome. Today we will talk about Chapter 2, entitled Strategy, the Totality of Our Decisions with regards to pay and employee benefits in our modern organizations. Of course, as you already know, in the US, compensation refers to all forms of financial returns in tangible services and benefits that workers receive as part of their employment relationship with their organizations, and as part of the requirement of the government to make sure employees are treated fairly and that they receive an honest day's pay for an honest day's work. However, in other countries, compensation definition varies. For example, you know by now that in China, the contemporary meaning of compensation includes returns as well as entitlements. In the Japanese, view compensation as giving something. So having said that, compensation may mean different things to different people. Just think about, why do we go to work? Do we go to work to make a living? Of course, making a living is a necessity. But what happens when we have enough money and you don't need compensation? Do you still go to work? And if you do go to work, what is the purpose of that? So if we're thinking about why is it that Warren Buffett or Bill Gates wakes up in the morning and they work perhaps more hours than you and I, at least strategically, thinking long term, they're trying to make a big difference. So they're not doing it for money necessarily, but they would like to obviously receive an acknowledgement of their hard work and to make a difference in the lives of others in society. So, but compensation basically means obviously financial returns for all of us and tangible services and benefits that are offered as part of our employment contract. So having said that, financial returns are an important part of our compensation for majority of us as it goes, at least for the time being. Maybe there will be some idealistic or utopian perception of the future where we don't necessarily have to work for money, but maybe we do it for acknowledgement because, as a society, we would have enough food, enough security of the basic necessities of life. But until we get to that point, we need to obviously be concerned about what strategies we use to pay people fairly. So total compensation are transactional returns and include pay received directly as cash and that which is received indirectly in the forms of benefit. Cash payments can include base pay, merit pay, cost of living adjustments, as well as incentives that companies, corporations, and departments offer. And benefits can include pensions, medical insurance, and programs to help balance work and life demands for our workers in today's society. On the other side, relational returns are the psychological benefits that people receive from their work, and they can include being recognized for your contributions, having a status as a result of your qualification, expertise, and contributions, having some sort of security, being able to learn and stay up to date in your organization, in your profession, and doing something that basically challenges us. So all those benefits that we receive on a personal level or intrinsically that we want and that motivates us to get up in the morning and go to work every single day. And the model that you read already in Chapter 1 in terms of total return, which can include your compensation as well as the relational benefits, hopefully this explains a good view of what is expected for all of our strategies in regards to pay and compensation. Hopefully, as you are skimming through all the chapters in your two textbooks, you can see how each of the concepts or theories or chapters relate to this specific model for you. Remember, the goal is to be competitive in the industry and to recruit and retain employees for the long term. Otherwise, your employees may end up going someplace else. Now we will talk about Chapter 2 in the compensation textbook entitled Strategy, the totality of the decisions with regards to pay and compensation. So we will examine the key aspects of decisions that we reflect on during the creation of a compensation strategy in any organization or company. The key premise is that the way employees are compensated can be a source of sustainable competitive advantage for you as a manager, for you as an entrepreneur, for you as an owner, or for the organization in general in your industry. We will talk about 3 different tests to identify whether a pay strategy provides a competitive advantage or not. And also the steps involved in developing a total compensation strategy tends to be, first of all, assessing the conditions, deciding on the best strategic choices, using the pay model, implementing the strategy through the design of the pay system, and finally reassessing the fit between them. There are a couple of alternatives to developing a compensation strategy, and that is to look at the best fit and the best practices approach in our organization, in industry. First, the best fit approach presumes that one size does not necessarily fit all. Managing compensation strategically means fitting the compensation system to the overall business and environmental conditions that this business is facing at a given time. On the other hand, the best practices approach assumes that there is a universal best practices approach that we can find and actually adopt. The focus is not on what the best compensation strategy is, but on how to best implement the system and ultimately fit the compensation system to the business in the environmental conditions facing that specific business or organization. When we're looking at the similarities and differences in strategies, we need to keep in mind that compensation strategies of 3 different companies can be a good example for us. And most of you are familiar with Google, Nucor, and Merrill Lynch. So we can contrast their compensation strategies as we're reflecting upon the theories, practices they're discussing in this chapter. All 3 of these companies are innovators in their industry. Their decisions on the different dimensions of compensation strategy, which include objectives, the internal alignment, externally competitive, employee contributions, and management, are both similar and different to some extent among these 3 companies. However, all 3 of them do formulate their pay strategy to support their business strategy. That is something that they all have in common. And all 3 of them emphasize outstanding employee performance and commitment in their organizations. However, they are also having some major differences among them as well. While Google is one of the largest companies in the world, it positions itself as a still being, at heart at least, the feisty startup which is populated by these professional nerds and math whizzes. At least that's the perception that we get from outside perspective. Google offers all of its employees very, very generous stock options, and many of them obviously have become very rich, and in some cases millionaires, working for the company. Its benefits are also very good. Actually, its benefits, some people say, that go way beyond the basics compared to their competition. Nucor Steel is a pioneer in the recycling steel scrap and other metals into steel products. They emphasize high productivity, high quality, and low cost products. Nucor provides an opportunity for those who are willing to work very hard and to make a lot of money by helping the company be productive and profitable. Obviously, that's going to be all of us, or the type A personalities that go above and beyond with regards to their personal and professional achievements. So as a result of their pay strategy, an hourly employee at Nucor in a given year can make up to about $70,000 to $75,000 in wages and bonuses combined. Now, when you compare that to the average annual wage or salary in traditional U.S. manufacturing, which happens to be about $45,000, $47,000 per year, there's a huge difference, almost twice as much in terms of Nucor employees. Also, Nucor has had no layoffs. When steel prices are low, bonuses are lower. Nucor's labor costs are flexible downward when necessary, but that flexibility is not achieved through the use of layoffs. Merrill Lynch, on the other hand, which is now part of Bank of America, they tend to rely heavily on the human capital of their employees to compete in the industry. Pay objectives are straightforward: to attract, to motivate, and to retain the best talent in the industry. Brokers are paid bonuses on a sliding scale for up to about 50% of the broker's annual commission. They call it production. There may also be incentives for team production, adding new clients and growth in production. The aggressive pay-for-performance approach is now seen as a key factor in the meltdown of the financial industry. Yet, Merrill Lynch routinely produces disproportionately high share of Bank of America's overall net income. So these three different companies operate in very different industries and face different conditions, serve different customers, and employ different talent. So the difference in their pay strategies may not necessarily be surprising to some of you or when we're reading the textbook based on the information that's provided. Pay strategies can also differ among companies competing for the same talent in similar customers. So when we're talking about different pay strategies within the same industry, keep in mind Google, Microsoft, and SAS all compete for software engineers in marketing skills, but they focus on different components of an employee's compensation. In their earlier years, for example, Microsoft adopted a very similar strategy to Google's, except that employees accepted less base pay to join a company whose stock's value was increasing very, very rapidly and very fast at the time. However, when Microsoft stock stopped performing so well, they did shift their salary system to increase their base pay and bonus to the 65th percentile from the 45th percentile of competitors' pay. Microsoft retained a strong emphasis on stock-related compensation, but they eliminated their long-standing broad-based stock option plan in favor of stock grants. More recently, Microsoft scaled back their stock awards and they replaced them with cash. Their benefits continue to lead in the market, though. The SAS Institute, which is the world's largest privately owned software company, they take a different approach. They emphasize work-life programs over cash compensation, and they provide limited bonuses and no stock awards. SAS includes things like free on-site child care centers, subsidized private school for children of employees, doctors on site for free medical exams in medical care. They also have recreational facilities, sort of like Google as well. And SAS actually discourages employees from working more than 35 hours a week. Well, there might be exceptions at times, but the fact that they're discouraging employees from working more than 35 hours, it gives people the impression that they do care about work-life balance and the health of their employees. When it comes to different strategies within the same company, keep in mind sometimes different business units within the same organization do face different competitive conditions. So they adapt different business strategies and therefore fit those different compensation strategies all together with the specific unit. For example, the Korean company SK Holdings, they have much variety in their business units. They tend to include gasoline retailer, a cellular phone manufacturer, and SK Construction. So SK has different compensation strategies which are aligned to each of their different business units. Basically, we know that a simple let the market decide our compensation strategy does not necessarily work well internationally, because in many nations, markets do not operate the same way as they do in the United States, and in some countries, the markets may not necessarily exist. Emerging labor markets in some developing countries and highly regulated labor markets in some developed countries are responsible for less movement of people among companies than is common in the US or in Canada or in South Korea or Singapore or some of the European countries that you might be familiar with. So strategic perspective on compensation is more complex than it first appears. So what are these strategic choices that we may deal with in designing a total compensation strategy? As part of the discussion here, think about the strategic choices that are being offered. In other words, what business should we be in? What are our corporate objectives and plans strategically? What is our vision and values? Are they all in alignment with the pay system? Second, how do we win? In other words, how do we gain a competitive advantage in all the businesses in our organization? And third, how should human resources help us win? In other words, what are those HR strategies? And fourth, the question would be, how should the total compensation in the organization help us to win and gain that competitive advantage and ultimately sustain that over time? So what kind of social, competitive, and regulatory environment are we in? And how do we align our strategic compensation decisions to where it ultimately forms our compensation system and hopefully positively impacts employees' attitudes and behaviors in the workplace, which will drive the competitive advantage for our organization, for our employees, and for our shareholders. So there are many strategic choices. The question is, what is the environment outside of your organization? What is the internal forces that is maybe impacting your industry? And what is the situation in your own company? And then you make the appropriate strategic choices for you and your employees. Keep in mind, the strategy refers to the fundamental directions that an organization chooses to follow. An organization defines a strategy through the trade-offs they make in choosing what to do and what not to do at a given time. We should tie the strategic choices to the quest for an organization's overall competitive advantage that they can retain and hopefully sustain over time in their industry. At the corporate level, the fundamental strategy choice is, what business should we be in? At the business unit level, the choice shifts to the question of, how do we gain and sustain a competitive advantage in this specific business? And then at the functional level, strategic choice question might be, how should the total compensation help this business gain and sustain a competitive advantage in the industry? The ultimate purpose, or the so what question, is to gain and sustain competitive advantage. In terms of definition, keep in mind that the strategic perspective focuses on those compensation choices that help the organization gain and sustain a competitive advantage. We need to support the business strategy. In terms of supporting the business strategy, one theory basically proposes that pay systems should align with a company's business strategy. The rationale is based on the contingency notions that different compensation strategies might be appropriate for different companies at different times. So differences in the company's strategy should be supported by the corresponding differences in its human resources strategy, which can include their overall compensation strategy. The underlying premise is the greater the alignment or fit between an organization strategy and a compensation strategy, the more effective the organization is going to be in terms of gaining and sustaining a competitive advantage. Compensation systems can be tailored to the three general business strategies that are often discussed: the innovator strategy, the cost cutter strategy, and the customer focused strategy. The innovator strategy stresses new products in short response time to market trends. A supporting compensation approach places less emphasis on evaluating skills and jobs and more emphasis on incentives that are designed to encourage workers to innovate. In research and development companies, for example, this might be very popular and often used. The cost cutter approach strategy focuses on efficiency, doing more with less in minimizing cost. It encourages productivity increases and specifies in greater detail exactly how jobs should be performed. So you remember the scientific management principles from Frederick Taylor in the early 1900s, which focused on efficiency and cost cutting. In the customer-focused strategy, stresses delighting your customers and basing employee pay on how well they actually satisfy and delight customers every single day, to gain customers, to retain them, and also for them to become lifetime customers of the organization or specific brands of a product. Compensation strategies can also be based on generic strategy frameworks. You've read about Michael Porter, for example. So Porter's business strategy framework would label firms that cut costs to follow a cost leadership strategy, and those that seek to provide a unique, innovative product at a premium price to follow a differentiation strategy. Miles Snow's framework referred to defenders as those companies that operate in stable markets and compete on cost. And Miles Snow's framework referred to prospectors as those who focus on innovation in new markets. Conventional wisdom would be that competing on cost requires lower compensation, whereas competing through innovation is likely to be more successful with high-powered incentives or pay for performance. Well, most firms do not have generic strategies. Instead, they tend to have aspects of cost and innovation integrated as part of their pay system and strategy. Likewise, compensation strategies do not necessarily line up neatly with the generic business strategies. For example, Nucor and Southwest Airlines tend to rely on cost leadership in their strategy, but they pay their employees actually well above the market when firms' performance is strong. So they use stock options and profit sharing plans to do so. SAS follows a customer and innovation strategy, but they use little in the way of pay for performance. To do better than your competitors, keep in mind that an organization should consider how to fashion its own unique way of adding value through matching its business strategy with their pay strategy. Google might fit as an innovator, Merrill Lynch as a customer-focused, and Nucor as an innovator, as well as dedicated cost-cutter and productivity-focused maybe. Managers of these companies might say that they probably are using a unique blend of all three different strategies. Keep in mind that if an organization changes its business strategy, the pay system should change as well. There's a classic example of IBM's strategic and cultural transformation, which is discussed in many textbooks and literature related to strategic thinking and changes. Now, for years, IBM emphasized internal alignment, which worked well actually when the company dominated the market, but provided little flexibility to adapt to competitive changes in the environment. However, the redesigned IBM focuses on the high growth, high value segments of the information technology industry, and a new business strategy meant a new compensation strategy at IBM. They cut layers of management to streamline the organization. They redesigned their jobs to build in more flexibility. They increased incentive pay to more strongly differentiate based on performance of the employees. and they kept a very close eye on their cost to be obviously more efficient. With regards to supporting HR strategy, keep in mind that compensation strategy that supports the business strategy implies alignment between compensation and the overall HR strategy. In the literature on high performance work systems and HR strategy, research has focused on a commonly used performance theory, which states that performance is the function of three different factors. That would be your ability, your motivation, and opportunity at a given time. This is known as the AMO theory, or AMO, ability, motivation, and opportunity. AMO theory. Compensation is the key to attracting, to retaining, to motivating employees with the abilities necessary to execute the business strategy while handling greater decision-making responsibilities at any given time. This is why many organizations seek MBAs, especially when they're looking for succession planning, development opportunities for their future executives and senior managers. Compensation is also the key to motivating employees to fully utilize their abilities on a regular basis to hopefully outperform their rivals. Higher pay levels and pay for performance are often part of the high performance work systems for organizations. And compensation strategy and HR strategy are central to successful business strategy execution. Of course, we do need to emphasize the importance of AMO, remember, ability, motivation, and opportunity, as well as the fit. So you need to keep in mind AMO and fit, ability, motivation, opportunity, as well as the fit for the employee and overall strategies, which obviously is going to influence the revenue and cost generated in your organization. We always are interested in the fit between HR strategy and compensation strategy and overall effectiveness that we get as an outcome of all of this taking place. So as you can see on this chart from left to right, the HR strategy influences your compensation strategy and vice versa. So then we're looking at basically the HR strategy and the compensation strategy having an impact on your ability and motivation and opportunity. Then you're looking at the horizontal and vertical fit for your employees' ability, motivation, and opportunity, otherwise known as AMO, to basically drive your business strategy execution, which hopefully increases your revenues and decreases your cost. Ultimately, that will determine the overall effectiveness of your HR and compensation strategy in your company, in your industry, and hopefully over time in society. So effectiveness can be looked at in terms of competitive parity, competitive advantage, and stakeholder satisfaction. With regards to strategic pay decisions, keep in mind that all organizations that pay their employees do have a compensation strategy. Some of these strategies tend to be written and shared with all employees. Other compensation strategies, on the other hand, tend to be developed based on ad hoc decisions that managers and owners make on an ongoing basis. Note that managers in all companies make at least 5 different strategic decisions regarding the objectives, internal alignment, externally competitive, employee contribution, and overall management. Some do this in a rational, deliberate way. Others do it more chaotically. In other words, their general responses to pressures from the economic, socio-political, and regulatory context in which the organization operates. So good luck paying your people well. That makes them extraordinary employees that create high performance for themselves, for your department, and for your organization. Good luck. As always, try to cite your textbooks as academic sources for everything you write and reflect upon, and then rely on some recently published in classic journal articles in academia that tend to support your view, or at least theoretically they're making a point, and then you can relate them to the modern practices. Good luck.